I want to talk about profiling and calibrating your monitors. I don't know if Scott has told you, but you guys got one of these fancy data color spider devices, which is backwards on my screen. Anyway, what do you guys know about profiling or calibrating monitors? You guys heard that term before? Oh, I see stuff in the chat. You've heard the term. Scott mentioned it. Okay, well, let's talk about things. Imagine you were sending a job to a client. Maybe they're in like, LA or something, and it's a calendar and there's a sweater, and that sweater has to be the exact right color when it prints. Or even worse, it's a catalog. And when people order that sweater, it has to be the exact right shade of burgundy. And then imagine your monitor isn't showing you things quite properly. Maybe your monitor's a little bit too green and maybe a little bit too dark. If your monitor is a little bit too dark, you're going to go, that's looking a little bit dark. And you might kind of brighten it up a bit. And if your monitor is too green, you might go, that's looking a little bit green. And you'll add the opposite of green, which of course is magenta. And suddenly it's got a bit of a magenta cast to the image. I mean, it looks fine to you, but your monitor was showing you too green. So you added some magenta so that it looks fine to you. Then you send it to your client and they're like, hey, this is looking too green and too light because you lightened it because your monitor was dark. And you added some magenta because your monitor was too green. The idea behind profiling is to make sure that what you see on your screen is what everybody else who is properly profiled will also be seeing. Now, there's also a term calibration. Some monitors can be calibrated and some can't, but they can all be profiled. If you got a fancy desktop monitor that has like, a bunch of buttons on the front where you can adjust the brightness and the contrast, and some of them will let you adjust the RGB, the red, green, and blue values individually, you can profile, or you can properly calibrate that monitor. If you can't calibrate it, your monitor is going to be a little bit inaccurate, and you can generate a profile that will correct that. A good way to think about calibration and profiling, imagine you've got a ruler and it's supposed to be like, a 12-inch ruler, but that it's not quite. It's only, say, 11 inches. Maybe it was made out of wood that shrunk. So you got this ruler that says it's 12 inches, but it's only 11. Calibration would be, well, making it right. Grab the end of that ruler and stretch it out so that it becomes proper. Just like with calibration on a monitor, if your monitor was too dark and too green, you could say, well, let's just up the brightness on the monitor and then go into the RGB values, go into the green there, and we'll decrease the amount of green. That's calibrating your monitor so that the monitor itself is correct. Just like, stretching that stick back out to 12 inches is calibrating that stick so you know that it's 12 inches. Profiling is saying, well, I know there's some inaccuracies in it. So I know that my stick is only 11 inches. So if I measure something, well, I just have to say, well, I know it's only 11. It says it's 12. I'll just compensate for that. I know what the inaccuracy is, and I'll just correct for it. And that's basically what this little device here is going to do. If you've got your laptops, you don't have a lot of control over adjusting the white balance, the color, things like that. There's some presets that it comes with, and I'll show you those. But if you have an external display, like a nice, BenQ or a C monitor, some of those you'll be able to kind of do some more fancy adjustments to. So we're going to take a look at using this to profile our laptop. Now, the first thing you'll have to do is go to their website and download the software. And I think I got it here. Yeah, when you get the box, when you open it up, there should be a little card in there that'll say, go to this website to download your software, install it. It'll be a little installer program. You'll install that. And in the bottom of the box, when you take the little colorimeter out, there'll be a little sticker in there that'll have the serial number. So you'll need that to activate the software. I don't know why you need to activate the software. It's not like you can use the software without this thing. But anyway, there's the serial number, and the website to download everything is on a card in there as well. And once you got that installed, you'll have to connect this thing to your computer. And the bit of a downside there is it comes with a cable with a USB-A adapter on it. And of course, your laptops will probably be expecting a USB-C adapter. So in that case, I'm just going to use this little USB-C to USB-A adapter, and I'm going to connect that into there. And then I'm going to plug it into my computer. I have now connected this to my machine. Now, when you get the software, let me share my screen here. And once it's installed, it will be in a folder called Data Color, because that's the company that makes the Spider there. There's the Spider X Pro. And so let me hit OK. It's got the license code ready to go. And first off, it tells you make sure that your monitor's been on for, about a half an hour or so. Sorry, you're late. That's okay. That's fine. It's all being recorded anyway. Lighting conditions. When you're doing your editing, you probably want to make sure that you're in an environment where you got control over the light. Like if you're in your kitchen and, in the morning, the light's very different than it is in the afternoon, and at night it's completely different. It's probably not a great place to be doing all of your editing. So find somewhere you can kind of control the light. You don't have to be in complete darkness, but you also don't want to have like a bright light shining onto your screen there. So check the lighting conditions, make sure that no intense light is falling directly on your screen. Your monitor settings, let's talk about those for a second. On a Mac, if you go under Apple menu, into the system preferences, and into your displays here. These are all the different things you can adjust on your computer. When you go into the displays, you'll notice that you got some presets down here. By default, it comes with this one here. Now, I don't know if you guys will be able to see the changes. When you're switching between display profiles, I don't know where Zoom pulls the video information out of the feed. Actually, tell me if this changes. Does this look very warm toned compared to this? I feel like an eye doctor here. Did you notice a difference between those two, or do they look exactly the same? Does it look better like this or like this? The same. Okay, so it looks like you're not going to be able to see the differences that the profile makes. Zoom is pulling the video feed probably just before the video card then. This thing alters the way the video card puts out the signal. So your monitor will look better to you when you're looking at it directly, but it looks like Zoom isn't going to show the difference. But anyway, let me show you what's going on in here. This is the one that my machine came with by default because I got the Apple Pro with the XDR, the Extreme Dynamic Range display. But they give you some presets for if you're doing like cinema work, movies and things like that. Design and print. Now, this one's kind of interesting. You notice there's a D at the end. We got a D50 and a D65. That relates to what the color of white is. And when you talked about color balance, warm tone, cool tone, the Kelvin rating, basically. 5,000 kelvins is considered to be daylight. Anything cooler than that, anything that's, like 2,000 kelvins would have kind of a yellowish sort of tone to it. 5,000 kelvins is daylight. And if you get into like, 6,000, 7,000 kelvins, it has a bit of a bluish sort of tone. The standard for white balance is D50, which is 5,000 kelvins, which is going to have a bit of a warmer tone than if you profile your monitor to D65, which is 6,500 kelvins. Remember, 6,500 kelvins higher than 5,000 has a bit of a bluish sort of tone. So if you got your monitor at D65, 6,500 kelvins for the white point, it's going to have a bit of a cool, almost a bluish sort of tone. And most monitors out of the box, when someone, is going to be looking at your website or looking on Instagram, things like that, most computers are going to be at D65. If you're doing a lot of stuff for design and print, things that are going to be printed in magazines, things that are going to be printed, on printers and things like that, paper tends to be a little bit yellowish compared to something that's pure white. So if you set your monitor to a D50 or a 5,000 Kelvin balance, you'll notice it has a bit of a warmer tone. So I'm going to do D65 here just because that's kind of what the whole world is profiled to. And back in the software here, so I've checked my controls, set the color temperature to 6,500K or D65 or equivalent, and adjust the brightness to the level at which you're comfortable. Again, you probably won't see the brightness changes. Oh, you know what? Because I've got mine set to one of the presets, I can't adjust the brightness on my screen. I've got mine set to the photography one here. If I was in the default, I could use the little keyboard shortcuts to, the little keyboard things to adjust my brightness, basically. But when you're using a preset, it's locked in. So that's fine. I don't need to worry about that. And then plug the spider into a USB port. I got it plugged in. Now it says not a hub or a keyboard. And again, the spider has the USB-A connection. So you'll have to use some kind of an adapter. That's fine. Some like a keyboard itself doesn't have a whole lot of power to it, or it might not have enough data bandwidth for it to do a proper calibration. But a proper, the little Apple adapter, it's just fine. So I'll hit into next here. And you need to tell it what kind of backlight your laptop has. And most laptops these days are going to have the wide LED, so a wide range of colors that it can show, wide LED. We'll go with that. Next, I'm going to do a full calibration of my display. If it's your first time, you'll do the full calibration. If you've already done it before, just set to recal and it'll use the same settings as before. I'm going to do a full calibration, and it's going to do a gamma of 2.2. Don't worry about that. That just refers to the overall contrast of the screen. Mac and Windows used to have different gammas. Mac used to do 1.8, Windows was 2.2, and Windows at the time was like way more common than Mac. So the entire world settled on 2.2. The white point is 6,500 kelvins, and the brightness, I've got it set as the preset. I'm gonna hit next, and it says place the spider here. So basically you wanna stick this thing. This is what they call a colorimeter, so it can measure the color. So when you kind of pull it apart here, you got two, this is the weight that's going to hang over the back of the screen. This is the colorimeter itself. So this is basically going to stare at the screen while the software shows a bunch of color patches. So the software is going to go, I'm going to show you this color. And then this thing will go, well, I saw this color. And if there's a difference between the two, it'll be able to make a correction profile to make sure that everything looks fine. Now you can adjust where this thing is on the cord. You can make it shorter. You can make it longer. So if you're on a really big display, you'd want this thing, this is the colorimeter, in front of your monitor, this part hanging over the back. So here we go. I'm going to hang it on the screen. Now you're not going to see it actually on the little screen there, but trust me, it is. I need to make that cord a bit longer. So now the colorimeter is sitting right over top of that shape on the screen. And when I hit next, it's going to show every possible color. So it's going to start with white. Now it's going to show different shades of red, so dark red. Then we get into a medium red, and then it'll go up to the brightest red it can do. So it's going to go through red, it's going to go through green, it's going to go through blue, and then it'll do white, which, as we know, is a combination of equal amounts of red, green, and blue light. So right now it's measuring the colors individually. It says, okay, now I know what dark red all the way up to bright red looks like. Now I'm going to look at green. So now it's looking at dark green, moving up into medium green, and it's getting brighter and brighter into the bright. This is exciting, isn't it? Into the brighter greens. And what colors are going to do?
Watching the internet boot up.
It pretty much, yeah. Now it's doing the blues. So we've done the R, we've done the G. Now we're doing the B. Getting lighter and lighter. Good times. And after it does this, it'll do all three colors together. There's dark gray, moving up through the grays. Remember, every time you have equal amounts of red light, green light, and blue light, you have some kind of a shade of gray. So it's doing red, green, and blue all at the same time. And this is actually going pretty fast. If you went back in time, these colorimeters were a lot slower. The software was a lot slower. The computers were a lot slower. In fact, the software for the X-Rite, actually, when it showed the little thing at the bottom when it was calculating, the icon telling you to wait was a newspaper, a coffee, and a croissant, basically saying this is going to take a while. There we go, complete. Please remove your spider off the screen and click finish. There we go. So you can name this if you like. I'll call this one my I don't know, November 7th profile, whatever. And when you hit save, it applies that as your monitor profile. So your new profile has been created and your system will automatically use this new profile. So if you need to access the actual file, it's actually just a little ICC profile in your computer. And yeah, you can switch back and forth between different profiles. But for the most part, once you've profiled, just leave it. And you probably won't see the difference here, but you can actually let the software jump back and forth. So here's the uncalibrated state, and here's the calibrated. And you might be able to see a little bit in these areas over here. Uncalibrated, calibrated, uncalibrated, calibrated. And then when you hit next, it gives you an idea of how your profile compares to NTSC, the National Television Standards Commission, Adobe RGB. I'm getting 88% of Adobe RGB. sRGB. Remember we talked about sRGB being not quite as good as Adobe RGB. I'm getting 100% of sRGB. Cool. I'm only getting 88% of Adobe RGB. P3 is the native display profile, which I guess makes sense that I'm getting 99% of P3 here. But yeah, that's a pretty good profile. I'll hit quit, and we're ready to move on with our day. Cool, huh? So I'll post the lecture of that part of it to the interweb, so you guys can watch it when you profile your own monitors. And it's not going to be a huge difference. I mean, the machines are pretty consistent these days, so as they come out of the factory, they're all pretty close. But that profiling there just kind of makes sure that you're just to the nines. You're just, If somebody else who's properly profiled looks at it, it's going to look pretty much exactly the same. Once you send it out into the world, once you put it on the internet and things like that, it's the Wild West. You don't know what people are going to be looking at, but this just kind of gets you closest into that that average point in there.